Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to this latest episode of the Austin Muslims podcast. Today's topic is one that is important not only to Muslims, but really folks in our communities of any faith background, and that is the proliferation of data centers. I knew this is a problem that was on the national radar, and I'd read previously about how Texas is really at the epicenter of it. The state leadership has and the fact that we have inexpensive land and a lax regulatory regimen here and made it so data centers were growing the most here in Texas. My impression from what I read previously was that this was mainly something going on in rural areas, but I was really surprised in February when I discovered that Round Rock, a city I live in right here in the outskirts of Austin, was considering adding a data center. I looked online, I found two organizations here, Protect Round Rock and Public Citizen, which are both leading the fight against data centers. I joined them in the set of testimony that we gave to the city council in February 2026. And despite the fact that city council that night was overrun by people, really every single seat was filled. There was people standing outside in the lobby, standing outside even of the whole city hall, and everyone but a handful of people, half of those people being representatives of the data center, spoke very passionately against data centers, urging our city council to reject it. Despite that, the city council unanimously approved it. And in the course of getting involved in this fight, the folks who were leading the fight against data center discovered that this was going to be the ninth facility either already built or approved to be built in and around the Round Rock community, which was really problematic because of things you'll hear about in this episode. I want you to listen to this episode so you can educate yourself about the issue of data centers and why that should be a concern to you and me. The pollution and other negative externalities that cause directly threaten our water supply, our air. And in fact, we've already seen the deleterious effects they've had in and around the world, so much so that organizations such as the World Health Organization have issued warnings against these facilities and urged communities to put major protections around them to safeguard themselves. You're going to learn, more importantly, about the local fight in our communities, because this isn't an abstract issue going on over there. This is something going on right here in and around our communities. And without each of you being involved in things like this, they're going to continue to go forward. So when you're listening to this episode, you'll learn about data centers. You're going to learn about the organizations locally that are getting together to fight against data centers. I want you to follow those organizations. And even if this isn't an issue that you're very passionate about, one thing I want you to take away from this conversation is that for Protect Round Rock in particular, Gary talks about how he hadn't previously been someone who was, say, that active on this front. He didn't know much about data centers, but despite that, he's gotten involved in leading the fight against data centers along with other colleagues in the organization. So if you enjoyed this episode, follow the organizations, Protect Round Rock. I've included the website, and you can also follow them on social media, as well as Public Citizen. Both these organizations do wonderful work. And at a minimum, if you're following them, you can get to know about local events they have going on, to at least come and say hi to the folks from this organization. And ideally, you can find opportunities to get involved. With that, I will jump right into the episode. Hope you enjoy. Adrian, Gary, welcome. Happy to have you here.
Nice to be here.
Good to be here.
Let's get directly into this. You're with the organization Protect Round Rock. Tell us about yourself and the organization.
That's right. My wife and I are 20-year residents of Round Rock, and I think we pay more attention than the average person to what's going on in our community. Last year, in fact, I think it was Thanksgiving weekend, a friend of my wife's sent over a news article about a data center that had passed through planning and zoning in Round Rock and was moving to city council on December 4th. And we hadn't heard anything about that prior. So we started digging into that specific situation and doing a little more education of ourselves on data centers and their implications, and realized this was not a good thing for our community. And its location, it was close to schools, close to Old Settlers Park, and it seemed like just a really bad place to position a data center. So we started putting the word out locally on social media, my wife on Nextdoor, myself on Reddit, and a few other platforms. And we're really pleased and surprised by the community response that we got. There was a lot of interest, a lot of concern about it. So we started urging people to show up to the December 4th City Council meeting with the first reading on it. Decided to put up a website, put that up in just a couple hours, got the domain name Protect Round Rock. We wanted to have a more general name in case there were other issues we wanted to address going forward. So on the December 4th hearing, we had 25 people show up to speak in a crowd of about twice that. And we can tell a story about the process later, I guess, in the
Yeah, that'd be
conversation. But
great.
that's how we got started and formed a steering committee and have continued on in our efforts.
What is your role with Protect Round Rock?
Just leadership team. We're up to 7 people now on the steering committee or leadership team, and I'm the spokesman for the organization for most media interviews and testimony to capital and so forth.
I was a recipient of those efforts because on Facebook or Instagram, I saw Protect Round Rock posting about an additional data center that's up for a consideration, looking for folks to get involved and testify. Those efforts were well regarded, and there was a very big turnout as a result of it. So it's actually surprising in a pleasant way that you only started around November, because the first hearing was in December. The movement really grew a lot until February.
Thank you. I should add, too, that in the process of learning more, we found that 8 other data centers had already been approved in Round Rock, completely under the radar. We were absolutely oblivious to it. And so we got a late start in this opposition effort, but it's solid today. I mean, the first post I made on the Round Rock sub on Reddit got over 20,000 views. So it just shows the level of interest in the community.
Sure. And then Adrian, you are with Public Citizen. Tell us a little bit about yourself and the organization.
Thanks, Ali. My name's Adrian Shelley. I'm from Houston, and I joined Public Citizen 9 years ago as our Texas director. Public Citizen is a consumer rights advocacy organization. Our mission is to be the voice of the people in the halls of power. We have offices in Washington, D.C. and here in Texas. There's 9 of us in Texas. We work on issues around energy, environment, air quality, environmental justice, and also some transparency, ethics, good government, that sort of thing. I and my colleagues started to get into the data center space late last year. It's something we just started to hear about from people. It's kind of at the intersection of issues that we work on: energy, the electric grid, communities that are fighting polluting facilities, all things that we do. I have lived in North Austin, close to Round Rock, for 9 years now. My kids are in Round Rock ISD. And we learned about Protect Round Rock in December, right around the time that Gary was organizing around that first city council meeting. I think it was actually my colleague Dee in San Antonio who found Protect Round Rock and introduced me to Gary. And I have been a member of that organization, and we have been working together on that issue since then. The work has really developed and mushroomed in the last 6 to 9 months, such that we're similarly engaged with other organizations and other communities around Central Texas, in the DFW area of North Texas, around San Antonio, and increasingly now even in East Texas.
Can you give a basic overview of what a data center is and why people should be concerned about the proliferation of data centers in our communities?
A data center is the term that we give to warehouses filled with computer servers that host what we think of as the internet. Sometimes we call it the cloud. It's the place that our emails are stored and our photos. It's where the bandwidth for streaming Netflix comes from. A lot of the traditional uses of the internet take place in data centers. And indeed, data centers have existed in Texas for decades. Now, in the last year or two, we've seen an explosion in proposals for new data centers. And some of them are what we would call hyperscale data centers, referring to their size. There's not a specific definition, but they're usually sized according to their power demand. And so maybe hundreds of megawatts or more of power demand. And in Texas, we say 1 megawatt is enough power to power about 200 to 250 homes. You measure megawatt hours when you are looking at your electricity bill and you've got a charge for your usage. That's going to be measured in kilowatt hours. And we think of the demand as continuously being a couple hundred megawatts. Some of these facilities are even larger. They're gigawatts in size, or they're proposed to be gigawatts of size. And that would be 200 to 250,000 homes, a gigawatt of energy. Some of these are for generative artificial intelligence, generative AI. We're all familiar with AI and its role in our lives and in our society and our economy now. Some people would say that to a very large degree, people didn't really ask for AI to take over search engines and graphic design and all those sorts of things. But that's happened, right? And AI's appetite for what they call compute power which you could think of as taking place in the data centers, its appetite is seemingly endless at this moment. And so the number of new data centers proposed in Texas is probably on the order of 200 to 300 or so, maybe more. The number of existing data centers in Texas is about the same, probably about 300 or so, depending on how you count. So what we're seeing here is just a radical expansion of this industry in the state. And the reason that people are concerned about individual data centers cropping up in their communities is, first of all, they're often done so deals are made outside of the public eye. As Gary mentioned, when he learned about one data center proposal in Round Rock, he eventually learned there were 8 that had already been approved and built. It's knowledge. So they come into communities without transparency and without public buy-in. In some cases, they are extremely large. Then they require expensive investments in electricity, transmission infrastructure that can cost millions or even tens of millions of dollars. They are labbed. They've got coolers, chillers, even the servers themselves that make a lot of noise. The noise can be heard beyond the property line. They'll produce light pollution. Some of them will stay lit up all day. They've got backup generators, in some cases, dozens, even hundreds of diesel backup generators. And those don't run all the time, but they're used for emergencies. They're run for occasional maintenance. Those create pollution. They're loud. And the number one concern that we hear from people around Texas, they're thirsty. They use millions of gallons of water. And we'll get later into the different types of facilities and their water appetites. But they use a lot of water generally in a state and in regions that are facing almost continuous droughts these days. So to sum up, it is an industry that has exploded in this state and is coming into communities without their consent and in heavy-handed ways and bringing problems with them. Huge appetites for electricity and water, and people have learned about these tactics and have learned about the consequences of these facilities located in their communities, and they've started to speak up against them. I've been in the sort of helping communities fight facilities space for a long time. I've done a lot of work on concrete plants, metal recyclers, even up to gas plants and oil refineries. I have never seen an industry that has faced such widespread and almost universal opposition as data centers. And some of that is based on the problems that we've just discussed, but some of it is based on a larger trend of communities saying no to big tech.
A couple of things to add to Adrian's great summary on the data center status. Some of the other implications are they're impacting wildlife migration. There are farmers in North Texas reporting they've had no live births of calves since the data center went operational. They're only having stillborn instances. They're impacting bees. So there's all the environmental issues. They can create an additional urban heat island and raise the ambient temperature in the surrounding area by many degrees. The infrasound, I mean, the noise, the audible noise they make is bad enough, but the infrasound, the low frequency noise they make that you can't always hear. Some people can, most people can't. Can travel for miles, can't be mitigated with traditional things like landscape barriers or walls that'll pass right through there. And it has a huge impact on cardiovascular systems, on human beings. Neurodiverse population like folks with autism are even more impacted. It can impair your cognitive abilities. There's a huge array of issues that are being studied, and this is still fairly new. So we don't have a lot of good data. There's a big fire problem with the data centers. I testified on that issue with the House Natural Resources Committee last month and actually participated in a very large town hall in Bastrop County just last evening about the fire problem. We had a fire in a BESS, a battery energy storage system building at the Saby Data Center in Round Rock 2 years ago that never made the media. If you search on it or try to find it online, the only thing you'll find is the official fire report we have on Protect Round Rock that we obtained by open records request. But that took the entirety of the Round Rock Fire Department, 14 pieces of apparatus, 44 firefighters, 5 hours to extinguish. And it emitted smoke laden with carcinogens, heavy metals, and other toxins into the immediately adjacent neighborhood. Water from the firefighting efforts, also contaminated with those toxins, entered a storm drain and a tributary to Brushy Creek. And it was all kept quiet from the public. No warnings, no notifications, nothing to the media. And that's in in a relatively urban area with a large career fire department. If you imagine the impact in our rural areas where we have volunteer fire departments, we don't have ready supplies of water to combat them, it's an immense problem. That's just another aspect. And the fact that many of these AI centers are being used to support mass surveillance should be of concern to everyone.
Now, all good points. They're also related to the lack of transparency and the fact that there's a lot of things we don't even know about because they're so new. Some of the negative impacts they have are yet to be studied in more detail.
Absolutely.
Why is it that we're seeing a proliferation of data centers in Texas? From what I've read, this state is ahead of other states in the U.S.
Well, a couple of answers to that. Cheap land and cheap energy are a good starting point. We also have a light regulatory climate here. It's easier to get permits. And because we have our own energy grid, the ERCOT's grid, it is easier to bring large loads and large sources of generation online here. A lot of these larger data centers are also proposing co-located gas plants. And in some cases, those gas plants will be connected into the energy grid. And that process is much quicker. Now, ERCOT and the PUC are actually facing challenges with the ridiculous number of large loads that are trying to get onto the grid right now. But generally, it is easier to come online here.
That makes sense.
The reason perhaps Adrian can't discuss is that Governor Abbott welcomed them in, offered immense tax abatements. I mean, initially it's over $1 billion. By 2030, it'll be over almost $6 billion in tax abatements. So the much vaunted tax benefits of having data centers in town is wildly exaggerated. Many local communities are given tax abatements or other incentives as well. So they've been welcomed in with open arms despite the recent pre-election flip-flop on the.
That's absolutely right. Yes, the Texas is famously open for business, and the state sales and use tax exemption was put in place, I think about 6 years ago. There's about 141 data centers that are taking advantage of that state sales and use tax. Texas is a state that welcomes industry. But there's also a real push here towards semiconductor manufacturing in Texas. Mm-hmm. Some of the largest manufacturing plants that have been announced here in recent years have been semiconductor manufacturers. So there is this desire to build out the tech economy here in Texas as well. There's, again, close to where Gary and I live, there's a very large Samsung manufacturing facility in Taylor, Texas. So Texas fancies itself a business-friendly state and a big tech state.
In fact, we came up with a catchphrase for during our protest of, speaking of Round Rock, is business friendly but resident hostile. And you could probably apply that statewide.
Yeah, it sounds like a really good characterization of where we are. For people who are advocates of data centers, what are some of the arguments that they make?
Well, without facts to back them up, they kind of poo-poo all the data-driven, science-driven objections and said, no. In fact, our recent data center folks that got approved in February were absolutely discounting the idea of infrasound, calling it magic sound, and just disparaging it. And these folks come into town before the citizens are aware of it and woo and seduce the elected officials with advanced promises that usually don't happen and try to counter the data and science-driven arguments. So the residents, when they're objecting, are facing an uphill battle. But they're starting to promise jobs less as the reality is set in. The permanent jobs in a data center are minimal. The Savvy data center, very large data center, Round Rock, one of the early ones, for their financial incentive package with the city, they only committed to 20 permanent jobs over 5 years, just as an example. And that's an 84 megawatt facility. So there are jobs, and they're starting not to promote that quite so much. There are absolutely short-term or finite-term construction jobs that are typically well-paying and everything. And that's great. It gives the trades some solid business. But after that, they're almost self-sustaining. So jobs aren't a factor. They promise tax money to benefit schools and public services, but with the abatements and other incentives, those are usually rather minimal. And cities will claim, Round Rock's one of them, that they have very low demand on city services and almost no call for emergency services. And that's an absolute falsehood. So we're fighting well-funded corporations, typically out of state, that are absolutely telling lies. But the lies are seductive enough, elected officials are going along with the program to the detriment of their communities they're supposed to represent.
Yes. And I would add to that the industry proponents, as Gary said, they've gotten more sophisticated in how they describe what they do and how they pitch themselves to communities. Two things that I hear frequently from industry proponents. One is that we are in a race with China and that there is a national security imperative to beat China in the AI war. There's a couple of things wrong with that argument. First of all, the actual number of data centers in the United States outnumbers China by about 10 to 1. It's around 5,000 in the United States and about 500 in China. Second, our investments, both capital investment and other investment from the big tech sector, has outpaced China by about a factor of 4 or 5 over the last couple of years. And then finally, there's the argument that China is a totalitarian state with a much larger population, and that a lot of its interest and investment in is probably for mass surveillance of its people, which many people believe is also what's at work in the United States as well. Right. But the argument that we somehow are in direct conflict with China and need to beat them in the AI race is nonsense. And the other thing that I've heard more and more from the industry lately is do you enjoy this? Do you like your phone? Do you want your maps and your calendar to exist because you need a new data center in your community for that to happen? And of course, the answer to that is we already have phones. We already have cloud-based storage. We have been living alongside, as we've discussed, the data center industry for several decades. What we haven't asked for is, again, the explosion of new facilities to satisfy the endless demand for computational power of generative AI and the various uses that it is being put to, both known and unknown, to us as citizens. So as Gary said, the arguments generally fall apart under a little bit of scrutiny. I would say about the only persuasive argument is the tax base, and that is conditional on them not seeking tax abatements, which they virtually always do.
Of course. And there was one thing that struck me in the city council meeting is that industry advocates, I expected them to have good amount of really tight arguments about the benefits of the data center, but they were very hubristic and then dismissive in a very caustic way. And then on top of that, the paucity of these are the advantages we bring. I think they were talking about how, yes, we all have jobs and our employees volunteer. And then the number of jobs they promised and like volunteering on a local baseball team, that's your argument for a multi-million-dollar facility that's going to cause pollution and all this kind of environmental damage. You need to have more benefits than just we have 20 employees who will occasionally go to a little league game. What's happened here locally so far leading up to the February City Council meeting?
Well, the first reading or public hearing on the data center was December 4th. Like I said, we had 25 or so people show up and testify. We had about 50 in the room. And uncharacteristically, the city of Round Rock or the city council decided to let this matter go to a second reading. The city charter says anything that involves a public hearing has a first reading and a second reading before a vote is taken. The norm in Round Rock and perhaps other communities is to have the council waive that second reading and go ahead and take their vote on the night of the first reading. They decided to put this to a second reading. And the mayor indicated it was only the second time in his 15 years serving on the council that a second reading has actually taken place, which is kind of interesting. They told us that night that the second reading would take place probably at the second meeting in January. So we felt that gave us a little more time to get more organized, get more people involved, and take advantage of that delay in the vote, I guess, to build more momentum. And Adrian's group, Public Citizen, has been a phenomenal help through this entire process. And we started talking about holding a rally beforehand, doing an art build for signs and getting a lot more people on the ground in the room for that second vote. Ultimately, that second reading was postponed until February 12th. We later discerned why that was. For February 12th, we had over 50 public speakers. We had an online petition with over 3,500 signatures. And it's worth noting that that's significantly more people than actually showed up to vote in the 2025 city election entirely, not votes to or from anybody, but I mean voters in the polling place, which tells you the level of concern and interest people had about this. So the council was presented with that petition with 3,500 signatures on it. 50 plus people showed up to vote, to to speak. We filled the room to capacity, overflowed into the lobby and outdoors. We had a march from the city library to City Hall, had a lot of media coverage there. People testified for about 3 hours. And as soon as we were done, the council took their vote and it passed unanimously with no discussion and nobody explaining the reason for their vote or even acknowledging the concerns of the residents they're supposed to represent. And in between the two, on January 8th, Skybox, the data center developer, held a invitation-only information session at a local hotel. And there were 40-ish people there. Everyone spoke out in opposition with one exception. And clearly the sentiment was against this facility. And people very, very clearly, plainly, and respectfully expressed the reasons for their opposition. Well, between the first hearing on December 4th and December 12th, the city and Skybox had held one or more meetings. And in that process, the allowances for that data center expanded almost doubling. The initial proposal was 450,000 square feet. Now they'd be permitted to build up to 250,000 square feet. Instead of a 30-foot, I believe it was, building height, now they could go to 60 feet. Instead of 40 megawatts, they're now allowed 75 megawatts. So somehow in between those two meetings, the size of the project nearly doubled and more than doubled in terms of square footage. And that was done with no public input, no public notice. It was presented as a fait accompli at the February 12th meeting. So despite obvious overwhelming opposition by the residents, and we had NASA scientists talking about infrasound, we had neuroscientists talking about the impacts, and it fell on deaf ears. And on the night of February 12th, the council unanimously approved this data center. Interestingly, and I'm convinced it's why the second reading was pushed off until February 12th, February 13th was at 5 p.m. was the closing of the filing period to run for the office of mayor and 2 open city council seats. I think the council clearly saw how large the resident objection and opposition to this was. I think the reason they even had a second hearing was to be able to postpone it. And then they held it when they did to make sure none of the thousands and thousands of very irate citizens would have the opportunity to file to run for one of those seats. It'll be up for election, or was up for election in May. So I think it was very, very intentional, very, very structured. And retrospectively, one of our errors was not immediately starting to find and field candidates run for that election back in December when we learned that there were already 8 data centers approved.
I was in contact with a member of City Council, Frank Ortega, and the impression that we had from City Council was very much that, look, we're really torn on this. We don't know what we're going to vote. We're really going to listen to the testimony that we get the day of. But then it was clear from the demeanor of every single member of City Council, as well as the mayor, that they'd already made a decision, because the line of questioning to people was very adversarial and dismissive from the get-go. The night of the hearing, it became clear that decisions have already been made. This is more of a theater for the sake of it. And at the end of it, I had to leave early because the hearing went so long. But then I was so angry the next day when I saw not only did it passed unanimously. It was very frustrating. But again, energizing. At least it gave us a clear view of where we are and some of the things that we can do next. Before getting into what we can do next, anything else you want to add to that February meeting, Adrian?
I was there as well, thanks to Gary and his efforts. And I agree. It was one of the most disgraceful public meetings. The just complete disregard for people's viewpoints. And as Gary said, the seeming deliberate attempt to hide the true size and extent of the project, and the maneuvering to silence community voices and participation in local government is just disgraceful. During those 2 months between December and February, Gary, the other folks at Protect Round Rock were reaching out to city council members, were asking for sit downs, asking for more information. They were virtually stonewalled. And this is happening in towns around. There are some local governments that are honestly wrestling with these questions and that are being as transparent as they can, that are refusing to sign non-disclosure agreements with companies. But unfortunately, in many towns, it appears that the decisions have already been made and that the community's perspective is irrelevant. And that has to change.
Now, there have been some success stories. I mean, one important point to make over here is that this is not a partisan issue by any means. I mean, the way that a county voted in previous elections, whether it was all red or all blue, is not related to the opposition that folks have to data centers. And there have been successful campaigns of communities that have successfully fought off or mitigated some of data center growth.
There's the city of San Marcos, which formed a really excellent coalition, the Data Center Action Coalition, with some very talented people, good organizers, good design and media savvy folks. And they packed their city council several times. They had several people that attended zoning commission meetings and then city council meetings. And there was one particular facility that they were organizing against. And the night of the city council vote, they held a barbecue on the lawn outside of City Hall because they knew that there would be so many people there that they wouldn't be able to get at the building. And they won support of city council. There were a number of council members, I believe, a woman by the name of Amanda Rodriguez, I believe her name is, who was on the side of the citizens and the opponents almost immediately, and who worked on the rest of city council. And they have since then banned data centers in San Marcos. There's a couple of other cities that have taken similar steps. I can't remember the town, but there's a town in East Texas that essentially rewrote its zoning ordinance to permit data centers. There are more than 24 counties that have passed resolutions asking for more authority or asking for some form of regulation from the state government. Counties, of course, are not able to regulate development. They don't have any powers that aren't getting directed to them by the state of Texas. But there are county commissions that have denied tax breaks. Brazoria County, for example, just south of Houston, denied a tax break for a data center a couple of months ago. And there are also examples of data centers that have been built, but that have committed to strong community benefits agreements. My friends in the Hill Country Alliance have even been involved in negotiating some good community benefits agreements. So just as with any industry, there are good and bad actors. And it is possible for these facilities to locate in communities that have the resources to accommodate them and for them to invest back into the community with things like community benefits agreements. And there are examples of those. Now, that being said, in my line of work, most of our victories are going to come in the form of projects defeated, at least until we get some reasonable safeguards on this industry from the state legislature.
I think another recent success story that I really admire is in Lockhart. They recently created zoning ordinances for data centers that are so tight and restrictive that it's unlikely that any data center will try and enter the city. They're not banned, but the restrictions are such that it makes it very untenable for a data center operator to come there. And I think that's a creative approach. Adrian's point about the county's lack of controls in the state are very on point. And that's why you see a lot of data centers trying to go into unincorporated county land. The county commissioners' courts have no zoning authority. They can only deal with things like wastewater and some other very minimal things that aren't going to have a detrimental effect or any sort of dissuading factor for data center operators. And the point about this being bipartisan is so spot on. This is a issue that's uniting Americans in a time where we're pretty divided overall. Last night's town hall in Bastrop was co-sponsored by the County Democratic Party, GOP Club, the League of Independent Voters is actually who started it, and even Freedom or Forward Texas. So it's very much a uniting issue because of the almost universal opposition. There's a candidate for ag commissioner who's a Democrat. The outgoing lame duck Republican ag commissioner are doing joint town halls about the dangers of data centers.
Wow.
Yeah, this is I'm calling it a pan-partisan issue. It really spans political parties because it's almost universally reviled by the population.
And we're seeing some evidence of that even on the top in terms of, despite Governor Greg Abbott having been a loud proponent of data centers, just a few months ago, he had announced that, hey, maybe there is some room for concern here. Now, I'm not convinced that we'll see anything substantive come out of that sort of concern close to the elections, but that's evidence of the fact that this is really registering in a big way across communities. What kind of things can folks get involved with who are concerned about the effects of data centers right here in Round Rock?
I think educating yourself factually about the impacts of data centers and benefits, such as they are, is important. But One of the big lessons we've learned is get involved early. It takes a lot of work, but when these proposals hit the Planning and Zoning Commission is a time to get involved. By the time it gets to council, it's well on its way to being a done deal. So it's important for everybody to be an agenda watcher. It's a pain in the butt. You have to go to the city or county's website, watch for the posting of the agenda, which is typically 72 hours in advance of the meeting. See what's on the agenda, and you have to really wade through it because these are not presented, hey, there's a data center coming. You really have to wade through and read the language and interpret the language. Round Rock uses a PUD, a planned unit development. It's a generic zoning category that is a one-off each time. It doesn't fit into the normal and light industrial, heavy industrial, multifamily. It's a separate category entirely where they can set up their own restrictions and permissions for each and every one. And it's used widely for all kinds of things, not just data centers. But you've got to read those agendas, show up when you can, come in person to the planning and zoning or city council meetings. If you can't be there in person, watch it online. And they're also posted about 24 hours after the meeting so you can at least catch up if you miss one. But get involved. Keep your ear to the ground. Show up to those meetings, be educated on the issues, and show up to vote. Register to vote if you're not registered. It's getting harder and harder to vote in Texas. I'm a deputy volunteer voter registrar. We've got others. We'll come to your house, school, work, whatever, and get you registered if you're not. But vote and be an informed voter. Nothing scares a politician like an informed and involved voter. So I encourage everybody to be one of those. Show up every time. But watch those agendas, visit Protect Round Rock, follow us on socials. We're trying to stay on top of it, get word out to people. Make your own decisions, but be informed. Have the solid, factual data and know what's going on in your neighborhood and in your community. We're trying to build community here in Round Rock. Today, we're spending so much time online. Everybody's leading busy lives. There's lots of issues from local to global that are stressing us, but let's build a community and talk, the in-person conversations. We're holding a series of community picnics. We had our first one a couple months ago in Chandler Creek area. We're holding another one on August 15th at Round Rock West Park from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Come on out, meet your neighbors, meet the leadership team from Protect Round Rock, and let's start getting to know each other face to face as human beings. The humans in any community, including Round Rock, are what make the city. It's not our business-friendly attitude or buying $360,000 chandeliers to put in the Chamber of Commerce lobby. It's the people. Let's get to know each other. Let's find those things. We have way more in common than we have separating us. And let's start finding that common ground and becoming a real community where we know each other, we care about each other, and we know what affects you affects me, and just getting involved. We can't sit back complacent saying, I don't think about politics. I don't do politics. Well, politics is doing you. So you need to pay attention to get involved and have your voice heard. Speak at council meetings. They're people just like we are. You have 3 minutes to speak. Let them know what you think and show up to vote and pay attention to what they're paying attention to. Who are they listening to? Who are they taking their guidance from? Is it billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar corporations from out of state that are coming here to exploit our community? Or are they listening to the people who put them in office and vote accordingly?
Cool. Adrian, I know Public Citizen is doing a lot of great work in this regard as well.
Yeah, we are. And I agree with Gary that all politics is local, as they say. In order to be an advocate for your community, you need to know your community. And so I think it is imperative that people get to know their neighbors, become active in their communities, and take an interest in who is making decisions for them locally. It's the only way that will accomplish any change. We are a statewide office, and we do a lot of work at the state legislature in order to try to bring about statewide policy change. The next legislative session will begin in January of 2027. Any laws that are passed then will take effect in September or June at the earliest. So because we have so long for the legislature to actually meet, many people and even some lawmakers have been calling on Governor Abbott to call a special session to deal now with the data center problem. It is true that he has spoken up. That began with the June 17 letter that he sent to the PUC in ERCOT, asking them to develop a plan to ensure that new data center development would reduce residential electricity bills. I think that that word reduce is significant. And he's also suggested that maybe data centers ought not to be located in some areas. He said specifically rural communities, which might have something to say about who he's addressing. But he has said several things recently that would indicate that he is thinking about and wrestling with this issue. We don't think he's going to call a special session, so we probably will have to wait until next year, although he should, and we're asking him to now. But there are a series of interim committee hearings that are happening. Various committees of the House and Senate meet in the months leading up to the next legislative session in order to hear testimony on issues that are given to them by their leaders. They're called interim charges. And we have opportunities to attend those committees and provide public testimony on these issues. There's actually 2 of these hearings that are happening in the Senate next week. I'm not sure when this will air, but beginning on Monday, the 27th, there's a Senate Business Commerce hearing here at the Capitol. And then on Wednesday, the 29th, there's a Senate Finance on Monday and then Senate Business and Commerce on Wednesday. We're encouraging people to come to those. And in order to get folks prepared for that, we have set up a data center week of action along with a bunch of other organizations. We are in an alliance called the Alliance for a Clean Texas that works on energy and environmental issues in the state legislature. Some of the principal groups there are the Sierra Club, Environment Texas, Public Citizen, Environmental Defense Fund, Airlines Houston, and many, many more. We have come together to organize this week of action. It kicks off on Sunday night at 6 p.m. We have a webinar that is going to be about taxes and financial incentives, since that's the subject of Monday's hearing. And then we're going to talk about how to provide testimony and how to effectively lobby at the state level. So I would encourage people. Not everybody is going to be able to come to Austin in the next couple of days, but I would encourage you now to get to know your state representative and senator. Reach out to them to let them know that this is an issue that concerns you. If you have personal experience with a particular project or something that's happened in your community, you should tell them about that. And if you are able, then you should consider coming to Austin or writing and submitting comments or making phone calls or sending emails. All of those things are possible. My organization, Public Citizen, can help you out with that. So you can find us online at citizen.org/Texas and on various social media platforms at Public Citizen TX. In the data center space, we are the co-founders of an organization called the Texas Data Center Rebellion, which helps communities in their local oppositional fights. You can find the Texas Data Center Rebellion on Instagram, and you can reach out to us at Public Citizen to get connected to it. So those are some of the things that we are doing, and we are going to continue this work into and through the 90th legislative session next year.
Cool. Well, we've talked about data centers, why they're proliferating, some of the concerns we have, and ways for folks to get involved. Anything else on this particular topic that either of you want to put out there before we conclude just this part of that discussion?
I will just say I've been an advocate for a little while now, more than a decade, and I have never seen an issue motivate Texans like I have seen this. There is real appetite for change from people across political and ideological spectrums. We need to keep this momentum and interest and pressure, because the big tech industries are keeping the pressure on and keeping the momentum on their side, and they will take over our state if we don't let them. So
a very good concluding note. This is an opportune time to get involved, and everything you've talked about, I'm going to include links in the description of the show as well, so folks will be able to easily go and gather that. Now, the final question I'd like to conclude with is, tell me about a piece of art that inspires and motivates you.
Gary, you want to start? Or
Thanks, Adrian. I saw this on your prep list, and I was afraid you were going to ask this. But my honest answer to this is my favorite art is nature, wildlife, the flora, the fauna. That's where I find my peace and my inspiration, even more so than anything man-made. I love art, don't get me wrong, but my favorite is in the natural world.
That's really nice. Thank you.
It's a good answer. So I will say, I am in my office right now. Our office is a block from the Capitol, and we are in a building that provides housing low income housing for people who want to live in the city in a car free environment. So it
Wow.
requires to increase walkability and community living in Austin. So we know some of our neighbors, some of the people who live here in this building. And there's a gentleman that I met about 2 to 3 weeks ago. He's an artist. He calls himself Just Patch. And he was inspired by, if you can see them, our rainbow windows in our building. You can see here that we painted around the time that Governor Abbott mandated the removal of rainbow crosswalks in public spaces.
Yeah.
Since our office is a block from the Capitol or the governor's mansion as well, we decided to paint our windows in order to let Governor Abbott, there we go, know that he can't erase the LGBT community from public spaces. So
Nice.
our windows have been up for several months, and a Patch visited us a couple of weeks ago. He's an artist. He's a street artist, and he was inspired by our work. He read a little bit about us and what we do to paint a large piece, which is called Commencement. It uses the rainbow colors in a really excellent way. And he designed it for our space. It's actually outside of our front door now, next to our office. It's very large, very colorful. And he put it up just within about the last week. So it's new and it's there. And it's bringing a lot of color to our space. And he told us the philosophy behind it. It's about connection, connectivity, and what people can do when they work together in community. So it's really beautiful and we're really proud of it. And if you come to the Public Citizen Office, you will see it. So that is what's inspiring me in the art space today.
Very cool. Both have such great answers. Gentlemen, this has been a fantastic conversation. I've learned a lot. And then I'm hoping that when people hear this, they are similarly motivated to learn more and get involved. Thank you for all the work you do, and talk to you all next time. See you around town.
Thanks, Ellie. And thank you for being an involved citizen and coming out on February 12th. That's what it takes. And
Absolutely.
speaking for myself,